time, so I mean, it's good about sharing the year. So I mean, I think related to maybe we don't have a lunch.
There's a couple that lady that sat in the front row for your seminar and so maybe we can go but by like
on Monday. That's like the anti-point of
You can go hang out
Here and we dine out of the.
Oh my gosh.
no, but I'm like, and
Must have been your 50.
Like, no, hey, I'm right with you.
you know,
I wanted nothing.
You know, the funny thing is, the most, while I say that, we had the most in different markets. Yeah.
what's that? Oh, yeah. Every.
Yeah.
after the meeting,
It's beautiful.
like a nice little trip.
Good job.
They wanted a day off.
Terrible. You get around the back.
Is that right?
If you have just a certificate, just a white. I'm like.
You just focus on the content, Jake.
Yeah.
Oh, look, Shane.
I don't know.
Okay. Good morning. How are you? Very good. How are you? Good.
Groovy.
Okay, man.
Like, I've been.
Range and stripes.
I'm gonna get a call. Miss you.
Yeah. I go the way. Very kind of. I thought he was at Michael Bublé for.
I thought he was in Colorado.
For a concert. What did you say?
I thought.
You said.
He's over my pay grade.
He got up there doing.
That catch me eye. It's a gift of that.
Yeah.
Gift of that. We're lucky.
I thought.
I know. It's
I tried. I didn't make
like
You gotta do his. That is all.
Especially there, I was.
You have to go, why don't you go from here? I mean,
Did you get that out with you?
Our office,
Oh, sweet. Can you?
I have my
Wait, like 2 more minutes. Give people time.
Oh, we're waiting.
Well, we can get started and then we'll jump into the steps.
Oh, yeah.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. How are the roads? Glad you're here though. We've got something good to share. Let's start there.
My boiler got fixed this morning.
He's worried about you.
Last night, and I couldn't take it. So I had my fireplace going and one space heater in my bedroom and my dog. And I made it, wasn't that bad?
Sounds like a cozy night.
Yeah.
Cool.
Fixed.
I'm glad to hear that. I already
Buy a
knew
new
that.
one.
We were on a call this morning. All right, who else?
Our holiday parties tonight.
Yes, two of them.
So is ours.
At Eden Prairie and Lake
Should we
Minnetonka.
just like meet up after both of them, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys can come to us. We'll have a karaoke room.
Oh, I don't do that.
Really?
I don't do that. That's not my thing.
I'm starting to feel nauseous. I don't think I can make it now. You got people who are like, let's meet up afterwards. I was like, isn't that enough? That's a lot of socializing.
Oh, that's too much, Jake.
Too much for me. Yep, I'm excited for those. One more.
We had a great client event, like with several agents from this office, and it was awesome. We had a great turnout, great conversation.
Love that.
It was wonderful.
Good job. Those client events are a great place. Cool. All right, so we're gonna get started. We're gonna do this a couple of times, just in case people don't know who we are. I'm usually really good at just jumping right into content, and people tell me to slow down and introduce myself and introduce Trish in particular. Like, you wanna tell people who you are? And no, this is not a conversation like, don't you know who I am? That is not where I was going. I'm Jake Lures. I'm moving into the operating principal role, operating partner role for all 5 market centers that we kind of have together, which is Eden Prairie, Edina, Lake Minnetonka, Minneapolis, and Otsego. So I'm not going to take any more time because we have a lot of stuff that we want to cover today, but I'm going to introduce Jen. Jen Briggs is, or do you want to go by Jennifer?
No,
Okay.
no,
Jenny?
No,
Okay.
not
Jenny from the block.
Jenny. Calls me Jenny, yeah.
Jen is actually, she was the team leader in Minneapolis, and she's moving into the GM role, which I was prior to moving into the OP role. So I'm excited to have her kind of jump in, and I think we'll be able to do a lot more of these in a different way as we move forward next year. We got a lot of things to think about it. So, and then Tim Saprell is an agent out of the Minneapolis office, and he's done a really, really good job at walking through market statistics, what's happening particularly in kind of a unique time. So take this information. This is really, really important for you to be aware and provide context to clients. Clients can go find all this information, and who else can they listen to that we don't want them to listen to?
News.
The news, because according to the news, nobody owns a home anymore and the interest rates are 35%. We've got to provide context of data, not based on what we want, but based on what's actually happening. So these two are going to take 15, 20 minutes to kind of walk through the stats and hopefully have a little bit of an open conversation as well. And then I'm going to dive into kind of looking into 2023 and making lasting change. And then we'll action items together and go from there. So why don't you give them a warm welcome, guys.
Applause I've ever gotten.
Oh, come on.
All right.
We've done this before. Kind of feels like we're back at the anchor desk.
Yes,
Different studio.
we've done this.
Make sure you project because.
Can you guys see
Yeah.
us in the back? And
Well,
on Zoom?
And on
Yeah?
Zoom, yeah.
Okay, right on. I decided to not sit high up because I didn't want to have my feet dangling. So we're down here. But Tim and I were taking a look at these stats before we jumped in, and Jake kind of referenced this. You know, one thing that I've learned from Gary and how he presents data is that he presents the facts. He strips it of emotion and he just says, the data is the data. We're going to let the data speak for what it is. And we can choose to look for all the positive pie in the sky opportunity, or we can choose to look and think that the sky is falling. We're not going to say either of those things. We're going to give you guys information today. And then the question is, what do we do with the information? What do we choose to take action on? What do we choose to believe? So we're going from what the data is saying to Jake talking about what our beliefs are, and then we're going to move into some action plans. Okay? So data, emotionless data. Here we go.
Yeah. That's good, really good. So we all know that we're in some kind of a shift. Everybody's been talking about that. You know, that's, I think we accept that at this point. The question I want to start with is, what does it look like it was working?
Oh, geez.
Oh dear.
Blocking it?
No.
You wanna just control, can you control from back
Yeah.
there?
I'll just-
Or can we do this? Hey. Oh, no, that's-
No, it's not connected to this. All right, so what does it look like in the Twin Cities? We can go to the next one right away. So right now, we're in a market where there's low demand and low supply, both, right? So I don't think it would be too surprising to anybody to hear that pennies are down. So what we're looking at right here is actually, each data point on this graph represents pendings for that month. So going back to 2019, we see seasonality, and we see that, you know, part of it is like, well, we do that every year, and, yeah, it's kind of similar to the low points that we have experienced the last 3 or 4 years, so that's not a surprise to anyone. I borrowed this from David Arbitt's presentation. He does monthly, he does a webinar. If you guys aren't aware of that, it's a good one. It's about an hour. Takes you through a lot of slides, and I screenshot a few of these every now and then and drop them into our meetings. So what this is showing is daily activity for showings. Showings don't necessarily correlate to contracts because we don't know how many buyers are out there and how many houses they're looking at, but it's still, I think, informative to see. And we look at the gray line, that's 2019. So interestingly, in the first 4 or 5 months, we were kind of tracking with, and even a little bit above for a while, 2019. But then as the rates started to go up more, things started to change. You can see that it dropped off quite a bit. So not only are we below those record years of 20 and 21, but we're actually dropped, you know, underneath 2019 too.
Is this a graph that you would bring to a client meeting, Tim?
Maybe,
What would you say to a seller or a buyer with this? Like, how does it relate to them? Why do they care about showing?
well, I think it just shows how much buyer activity, relatively serious buyer activity there may be compared to the market they think they do. I like to say that I feel like the average consumer is probably about 6 months behind us, or the informed realtor. And so if that's the case, then they're probably thinking whatever March and April was, is kind of like, you know, what it is today. If you look back and you see where we were then, we had a much different scenario that was comparable to 2019 and not that far off of 2021. And now it's nothing like that. So
I would imagine it's also helpful just an expectation setting, right? I mean, it's what you're saying, that, hey, here's the data, you're probably gonna get less showing. It takes one showing in theory to get an offer. So what we wanna do is price your home and show your home accurately so that when you do get showings, you get the most bang for your buck with those. And showings are down. You may not have a deluge of people coming through there. So again, if we wanna draw this home for you guys and your clients, yeah.
So the
Can you
next
can you
one,
take that back and talk about the side of the buyer that consult? Which I already know the answer, but what you would say with regards to how you're counseling your buyers that are in this market. That Same data.
You just take that one.
well, I would just say now is a good opportunity. You know, and there aren't as many people, so this is an opportunity where, and I'll get into this a little more. Actually, it's not in here, but this thing of writing offers that are free of an inspection contingency is pretty much gone now. I'll talk about that for people to compete with, and we'll get into it later, but I personally don't think this is gonna last. So,
So now is a window of time.
I think it is, and I'll get into that more as we get into this. Yeah. So what I want to point out that's noteworthy is the accelerating pattern of this decrease in pending. So these are year over year numbers. So what this says is Q1 of 2022 compared to Q1 of 2021, our pendings were down 11%. And then you compare Q2 to the last quarter, and it was more, and it just continued to accelerate to the point where we're almost 40% down where we were last Q4. That's a big change. So this is, you know, something that we need to be aware of. This is, you know, it's momentum is going that way.
That's why you're tracking pending and not closed or active, is it?
Well, pendings are the demand side, and they are a little bit more recent data, although it's a lagging indicator. Close would be a little more of a lagging indicator, right? So just trying to get the most recent data that we can.
I think it's really important that we also have context of what the fourth quarter last year was like. That was also unprecedented. So,
Yeah.
so we would still be down just in normal terms, but understanding who was in the market last fourth quarter. It was like no time for anything. You've got to drop everything and go. So I think that's healthy to provide context because that number is big. And we're coming off of some really, really big numbers too.
Yeah, we're gonna look at that 2 slides from now. In fact, we could just skip ahead to 2 slides if you want. Lydia, click. So there it is. This is another one from David Arbitt's presentation that I screenshot. And, you know, to Jake's point, that light blue line at the top, the second half of last year, we never hit those levels before in sales. You know, and it was also hot in 2020. If you look, you know, it gets into November, December, see those numbers are kind of on top of each other. You know, it was a little bit of well, especially in September and October, it was kind of a delayed spring market, right? Pushed into the summer and early fall in 2020 because of the shutdown. So
When
you're
would
right,
you-
we're
what
comparing
year
to a
would you-
strong year.
What year would you say was the last normalish year?
I don't have a definition for normal.
2013.
Yes, I do, and I'll get to that. Let me hold that for just a second. All right, let's click to the next one. So this is listings by month, and I don't know, the reason I wrote on here, it's a little counterintuitive that to see listings stalled out is I think if you would have gone back 4 or 5, 6 months from now, I think the narrative that was being kind of almost accepted as likely to happen was more sellers are gonna understand that the market's starting to change. They're gonna rush to put their house on the market or, you know, like almost like a nervousness or stuff is gonna sit and it's gonna start to build up inventory. Well, we just really haven't seen that pan out. And here are the numbers if you want to go to the next slide. It's a lot of new listings right underneath pendants. So they're also down, but not like they're not tracking with the deceleration of the pendants. So what that leaves us with is on the next slide, these are the month supply of inventory numbers. And they've changed quite a bit. And 2.43 for the 7-county metro area, which I pulled yesterday, is the highest number we've had since before COVID. And what kind of market is that? Big time sellers market. Balance market would be like a 6-month
And
supply.
there's some talk, have you heard Gary talk about 6 maybe never being the balanced market again, that we might be looking more at like 4 as a true balanced market moving forward? So.
New rule.
We're gonna change the
We don't
rules
like
on
that. We're gonna change the rules. No, well, and I would also say that his long-term appreciation graph that assumes either 4 or 4.5% appreciation, there might be reason to believe that that needs to be higher too and steeper. And why would I say that? Because all the homes that haven't been built since 2009, right?
And the demand with the next generation.
And our growing population, I mean, those are good points, yeah.
Yeah.
So being balanced is just a word, but if you're trying to put this in market into context, you can say, hey, it's as good as it's been for buyers in 3 years. But nothing like, you know, what it was
So even if
many
4 was,
years ago.
even if 4 was the new balanced market, we're still in a seller's market. And it's a lot better for buyers than it's been in years now.
Yeah, right on. So we want to click ahead to, we'll talk about prices. So, can you go back? Oh, I see what I did. Yeah, okay, so that star is where we are now. So this is the graph that shows all the data points here are rolling 12-month data. So in other words, it takes all the kind of average of the amount of inventory we had divided by pendants over the last 12 months, and that's your data. But when I showed the last one, that's actually like moment in time data. So moment in time is where the red star is roughly. And you can just see how that compares to historical. Good way to, I would put this in every presentation to anyone. I'm sure you guys are already doing that, something similar to this.
What's your 2-minute, what do you say to a client if this is the indication?
Have you heard some people talking about a bubble? Have you heard some that, markets change, whatever? Yeah, it has. And if you look at it historically, we're not that different, where it's still hasn't fundamentally changed that much. It's still a total seller's market, but it's a lot easier on buyers than it was.
This is where using data gives you plenty of leverage to take the conversation from emotional to more subjective or more objective. So if you guys don't have data, you're not bringing data. Bring some data like this, so it's not your word versus theirs, it's statistical numbers that you just can't talk around them. It's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna show up there and you're gonna wanna have a story, right? The question is can you back it? Can you back it up? Or does it look like you're just pulling stuff out of thin air to serve?
We're talking about, it feels like a better market right now. I mean, as someone who leads with my heart and I wear my feelings on my sleeve, it's nice to show up and say, man, it feels like a better market, but like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so prices, is the next area. Okay, yeah, we won't even talk about this much. It's just, we've seen that percent of sale price to list price has gone down. No surprise. We all know there's probably, decent number of homes still selling for over list price, but it's nothing like it was. And those huge margins way above list price, I haven't seen a whole lot or heard a whole lot of that going on. And clearly when the numbers go down like this, you can imagine that there are some people that are closing quite a bit below their list price. So now the next one, prices. I can't wait to show you this. Speaking to Jake's point earlier,
Next one.
read that headline and just let that sink in for a minute. Housing prices are plunging. From Inman last week. That's not even general media. That's an industry publication that people look at. So now I'll go easy on them for a minute. Is there maybe some sliver of truth to this? Sure. There's markets in the country where neighborhoods have been basically built or bought by investors and things like that. Wall Street money is more prevalent. We don't have as much of that in the Twin Cities. So here's the truth. The next slide. The median closed sale price for November was 355,000 in the metro area, and it's only down 7% from our highest mark in June, and it's up compared to November. That market you talked about that was so strong last fall, we're up.
We're up from last year.
Prices are not down, they're up.
This closed price.
Yeah.
The real sales.
That's right. But it's the most current thing we got. There could have been a decent number of them in October that were written. Yeah, so yeah, it's lagging indicator. It's a great point. It's not that far into the past. And I think this narrative of prices are going down is not new as of the last month. I think it's been an expectation and almost an assumption that, people are just waiting for it to happen. And guess what? You're still waiting. That's the fact. So
They're just appreciating at a lower level.
Yep.
I mean, essentially, that's how you communicate that. They're not dropping, they're just appreciating.
I think that's the magic statement. You all need to internalize it. Most people think the value is falling off, it's just the pace of appreciation is falling off. Right.
Yep.
The historic average is what? Minnesota 2.75 the last 50 years.
yeah, clickbaity editors have a way of writing headlines that make you click, and make you feel like it's a little bit more negative than it actually is, right? But that's what it is. We have declining appreciation.
Yourselves.
Also on the note with iBuyers, Open Door is the biggest iBuyer in our area, and they own about a little over 300 homes compared to the tens of thousands of homes in Minnesota. They've got about 320 in our area. So they're not really making this huge monumental impact that Inman keeps talking about, with iBuyers being this huge deal. They're kind of a drop in the bucket compared to how much money they're losing doesn't really affect the average buyer all that much,
Yeah, but if you go to the next slide, actually, I pulled this Case-Shiller graph in here from David's presentation. This shows the appreciation, annual appreciation rate. So blue is, it's got to check this USA, but I think it's actually like top 30 markets or something like that, but it's a bigger sample size. And the reddish one is Minneapolis. And when things got real frothy in the last 2 years, you can see that other markets went way more up than we did. And so for a few of us that have been around for a while, we know that, experienced this in the past, back when we had our downturn many years ago. We are a steadier market that does not appreciate or depreciate as extremely as some other markets in the country. And that's another really big thing that you share with your clients when they're like, hey, our house is gonna plummet, whatever. This would be in my presentation too. I would be like, you know what? You hear things, but real estate is all local. We have a steadier economy. We have, lowest unemployment. We just don't have the same highs and lows.
You're talking about those numbers, red meaning Minneapolis proper or Minneapolis area?
I think it's the Minneapolis area. I'm quite certain that it is. And it's
And that's
probably,
compared to nationwide in the blue?
the blue is I believe it is, like the top 30 markets in the US or something like that. He has it clicked as USA.
I mean, I'm just curious on that and as well as the temperature of Minneapolis, and if that had anything like Minneapolis area, or if it's just citywide, or is that consistent? Because I mean, it followed the line for quite some time.
Yeah. And then things got wilder and that's when it changed. And, we don't get really 25% appreciation or depreciation in the Twin Cities. When other country or markets were doing that, ours was much more steady. And that's similar to the way it was in the 2000s, but certainly if somebody wanted to drop them an email and ask them, just clarify that, or maybe we could do a little Google search, but I think it's safe to say it's probably 7 or 13, maybe even 16 county metro is what that's measuring. I think I'm 99% sure that's how Case Shiller sort of surveys their metro areas. So, yeah, try to pick it up a little, maybe Jake. You all right?
10 minutes, that's fine.
Okay, so, I just did if you want to go to the next one, I just did a real quick kind of how we got here and, where we've been. So for prices, we had a lot of appreciation in quarter one of 2022. You go to the next one and it shows that, in June, we hit the high mark at 382, and this is 7 county, not 13 or 16 county. It may be different if you go to InfoSparks and check those. I typically do 7 county. And then the next slide shows that, July, it went down. And just to, make sure we're again reading, reality happens. That's 8 of the last 10 years. July was lower than June. So not necessarily a market shift, just finality. Typical seasonal pattern. There you have, like, looking back the last
Next slide,
10 years, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? Interestingly, the only thing that's a little odd here, this guy, right? That was the initial COVID shutdown time. Otherwise, it's almost a smooth graph over 10 years.
Well, and this can be used as a barometer for justifying building wealth. Whether it's investments, whether it's personal property, when you hold over time, you make money on the sell, you don't make it on the buy. So when you buy, you hold it long enough. This is a pretty significant time frame that you can justify. They're building equity over time.
And for those of you that just real quick, newer to InfoSparks and playing around with this data, this really underscores the importance of understanding if you're going to look at month-to-month data, or if you're looking at 12-month rolling average, because I could do a 12-month rolling average. This would almost be a real smooth line that just shows steady appreciation over time. But you go into the month-to-month data and that's seasonality pops out at you. And sometimes you don't want that because it's just confusing. But in this case, I'm trying to make a point about it. So definitely want to show that. The next one. It is a bit of a stagnating market where buyers and listings are both down right now. Ratio of sellers to buyers is still technically a seller's market, but not every seller will have the same experience, i.e. that they did 6 months or 18 months ago, right? Now it's, they're not all just gonna, quite the contrary. So, anything?
No.
Let's go.
Unless they stage and price appropriate.
Well, they're not gonna have the same experience. There's gonna be those houses that have, good representation and good preparation. And yeah, multiple offers, and there's gonna be okay houses that you're not gonna see a lot of action on, potentially. And it may be, you guys have probably figured this out. Anecdotal data is valid too. You know, it's why you go to team meetings. You can hear the stories and that's why you do accountability and you hang around the office a little bit. It's great to hear other people. You might have somebody in your office that's got a listing very similar to yours, but it's 8 miles away in a different neighborhood and you're showing traffic is nothing similar. And it's just like, well, there's fewer buyers and maybe at that moment in time, there's just a little more action going on over here right now. You know, you're gonna see a little bit of that more kind of, I want to say randomness a little bit, you know? So the next one, what can we be telling our clients? We touched on this a little. We always remind, you know, we don't have a crystal ball. We're not in the business of predicting, as Gary says, but certainly we can describe where we're at and talk about what we're hearing out there. People that are putting forecasts out. A couple of months ago, the Mortgage Bankers Association put one out that I talked about at our team meeting. They're predicting 5% unemployment and 2% inflation by the end of 2023. That's their economists putting their kind of paper. That's what they think. Where could we be headed? I've just jumped ahead a couple of slides, Lydia, sorry. One more. Certainly we got to look at affordability. Now we know interest rates had a big impact on what's going on. And so the affordability index that they put out, the weekly report, does take into account household income, median household income in our area, but also it does take into account interest rates. So you see that reflected in these numbers, and it takes into account appreciation too. So we never saw a number below 100 in my 20 years in the business. Not even close. We've seen it over 200 before. So 200 means that the household with the median household income in our Twin Cities market, they have 200% of the income that they need necessary to sort of buy a median household price house.
2 times.
Yes.
2 times what they need in order to be able to buy and afford a home.
And
That's what 200 means. So what does 95 mean?
It means that a family or a household, I should say, with median household income that is right on the median, they actually can't afford a $355,000 house. Doesn't mean they can't buy a house. That's really important because I think if you take a real quick look at this, you go, how can anyone buy a house? Not what it's saying. It's saying the median income cannot afford a median priced house. They're gonna have to buy something lower as long as rates are where they're at and prices are where they're at.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Well, it's also important to remember that almost 40% of households don't own a house. So we're talking, you know, which is another conversation. You want to go to the next one? So clearly mortgage rates are a big deal. Go to the next one, please, Lydia. Thank you. I put this in there because I just saw it the other day. It's pretty impactful. This came from the weekly report. How many of us knew that first-time buyers are only 26% of the market nationwide, nationally? This is from June 21 to June 22. That doesn't even account for the summer and early fall when we had high rates. So these are the people that have been kind of moved to the sidelines from appreciation and interest rates. 36 as a first-time buyer. Median age is like 5 years older than it was 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. So important to know that. For the next one, I just put in here, you know, as we forge ahead, just don't forget about this. This is what happened to the building industry. And, you know, we're still behind. We need housing units. I wonder what, like, and maybe the next.
What's most important to you about this?
If you believe that we have to build at least 1 million housing units a year to satisfy our population, we're way below that. That's what that chart says. And so when interest rates drop down to 5, how is the buyer pool going to look at that? Are they going to look at it the same way they did 6 months ago when they started going up? Oh my God, 5%, right? No, they're going to look at it a lot differently now.
They'll be more encouraged by it.
I would think so.
Because they've experienced the higher.
Right?
Right.
That 5's going to look a lot different than it did 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we don't know how the economy is gonna go, but most of the forecasts are coalescing around the idea that inflation is starting to get under control. The way they measure inflation year over year is gonna start to look like it's coming down because it's gonna be, soon will be measured against months where it was high, was going up, you know? And it's a little surprising that in the last week we heard good economic news, and yet mortgage rates went down. So clearly the smart money, lending that money, they do expect inflation to come down. That's where kind of the smart money is coalescing right now. And, you know, as soon as that signal really hits, those mortgage rates will start to come down. And, you know, unless something really crazy happens where inflation just stays really super pesky and surprises us. Yeah, I mean, I could see us going right back into a pretty frothy seller's market that was that different in 2021. It's just a matter of when, because I don't see a lot of new houses sprouting out of the ground.
Builders are definitely being cautious. I know there's some new construction people in here that could probably.
I think there's lots of new construction options out there for people. They're just too expensive.
Well, the reason that this chart looks the way it does is because a lot of builders went out of business. So, yeah, I mean, there's scar tissue there. I imagine it wouldn't be too easy to get builders too excited about putting spec stuff up right now.
There's similar info to this with, let's say, apartment buildings, because this is speaking to homes that people can buy, single family homes, people can buy. Looking at just kind of the nature in the last 3, 4, 5 years of how many apartment buildings have gone up. Is there data that we can look at for places to live? That helps, because I think the lower new construction houses is a part of the story, but places for people to live is another part of the story with apartment units for people to live.
I think the plan for some of those apartment buildings is turn into condos.
Yeah.
At some point, I mean, they're gonna wait out the.
Right, but that's still a unit.
A quick way to add to these numbers.
Some of those turn, there's 100 units building.
I wonder if they'll be allowed to, because I know part of the reason why a lot of those buildings were put up in favor of condos is because it was easier to build them. Like, I'm not an expert in this area. Somebody else can jump in, please do. But my understanding was just like the construction requirements and stuff like that are a little easier. So I wonder if when they go to a city and they're like, hey, we want to convert this, I wonder if they'll run into any blocks and what that might look like. But yeah, I don't know of data like this for apartments. There probably is, but I don't touch commercial. I don't know. But yeah, people are living, have to live somewhere, right? I don't know. I mean, there's definitely been a lot of new apartment buildings put up in the last 10 years.
Questions, comments?
I suppose these numbers would include single family homes that are built to be rentals. I'm assuming that would include this, or who knows?
Yes. Yep. But again, and these are national data. This is national. Yeah, in the United States, we hit a low of barely 400,000 homes built in 2011. So yeah, there is that too. It'd be wild to be in one of those markets. It would be so different than what we have here. To be in one of those markets where they just have a huge market share in homes, you know, that are being rented and what have you, and just brings up all kinds of dynamics.
Wendy?
I have a question. You said there are 2.43 months of supply right now, and I was just curious where you got that number from, because I checked InfoSparks and stuff and Mars numbers almost every day, and so I was looking at them this morning, and it's only showing 1.4 in InfoSparks right now for the 7-county metro for.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious about where the difference.
I'm so glad you asked that question. I started pulling it right off of MLS on my own right when COVID hit, because I wanted to know like what's going on right now. I didn't want to wait for that stuff to get updated. And so this is something anybody can do anytime they want. That data is all relevant, but I know he does some smoothing of the data, and depending on if you pull the monthly or, you know, 3-month rolling average or whatever, those numbers could be different. What I do, I go to the MLS and I just look at how many active listings there are. And I count all A's, even if it has a comma and a letter behind it, because that's how they generally do it too. I mean, you know, literally yesterday, there was around 5,800 active listings in the 7-county metro area. And then I went and I looked and I said, okay, well, in the last 30 days, how many have gotten pending? Although admittedly, I don't take the last 30 days. I go back a little bit just to make sure I give people time to register. So I think what I did is I went November, 30 days. November 1 through 30, how many pennants were there? So that active number of 5,800 divided by 20, roughly 2,400, it gave me 2.43. I'm going with that. I pulled it right out of the source. And that's how I pull all these numbers every week. So the same. It's my methodology. It might be a little different than InfoSparks, but it's valid. And I do it the same every time. So.
Well, and InfoSparks only update like days on market and those kind of things after month end. So first week of December, you can see what some of those are, but after that, it doesn't. And things do change week by week.
Well, here's a cool script for it real quick. If you're in a buyer meeting, you got somebody and you're explaining to them that now might be a good time to buy. And they might think, well, I really have it my way. You could go and pull that number and then you can say, now let's pull out actually all the ones that are under contract. Like our industry says it's 2.43, the way we kind of calculate this. Now let's see what it actually is on the street level. And you go, oh, it's 1.5. That's what you're up against. But it'll probably be about 0.4 in May. And if May looks like it did the last 3 years, we don't know. Well, I mean, it's the hardest forecast to make right now, but that's just another thing you could play with.
Another thing on those numbers is you're looking at it, depending on the market you're working in, try if there's a way for you to look through it yourself and communicate with them, take out the to-be builds. Because if you're in a community where the national builders have 42 to-be builds in their neighborhood, I work in one right now where if you search it, it's going to tell you there's 58 active homes. There's 12 that you could actually walk through right now that are completed and that could be bought. So that's very, can be very misleading as far as what those numbers.
Yeah, I think there are always going to be nuances. You guys snuck up very quiet. I know this is up to date because I get emails the night before from Tim. So it's always updated. What do you guys, give me a couple of ahas. I'm curious. What are you taking from this?
Yeah, so I thought it was really interesting with inventory being up, but new listings actually being down. That means all of our inventory is just stuff that's been sitting for a while. There are homes that have been on the market for 30, 60, 120 days. And that's a really good stat you can share with clients of like, yes, you can sell and there are homes that are selling right away. Shows depending is still very, very low. But if you don't sell right away, you're going to be in that big batch of 5,000 houses that's just not going to go. I think that's really great to help people understand how important pricing is.
Use that shift graph, even though the prices are declining, use that shift graph, and the longer you stay on the market, the trouble you're going to be in.
I think continuing to frame everything into context for people, talking about the history of the Midwest and the history of Minnesota relative to national media. I mean, I even have to remind myself sometimes when I'm, you know how it is, like I use Google so that you click the real estate as a favorite. So you get all the articles that are national articles talking about doom and gloom this and the sky's falling and pricing and all this stuff. And you really kind of have to, even as real estate professionals, pump the brakes and say, okay, I need to check myself because I need to go check my client's self. And you need to make that relative that our peaks aren't as high and our falls aren't as, and remind them that we've been right about here. And here's what Minnesota's doing. Forget about the white noise of the national news. You chose me because I'm a real estate economist locally. Realtors, isn't it realtors? MO says real estate is local, contact a local agent. Well, I'm your local agent telling you, here's what's happening here, 3,000 foot view, a 300 foot view at your front door.
I can't overemphasize the need for us to be economists and understand the numbers. I know it's not necessarily all of our favorite things to do. We just want to service people and get them in the house. The reality is our job is to guide. We've been in a reactive market for a very long time where we just put something on the market and see what happens. What should I offer? I don't know. Try this. So there wasn't any really rhyme or reason. We have numbers now to guide people and actually give advice that they should consider to be based on data, not on our feelings, but considered on data. What's the best way to actually move forward based on that? Jim?
Contrary to what we see and hear on the news, prices year over year here are up 4.4%. It's the rate of appreciation that has slowed, and that's key.
That's important. Lydia, could you share, they said they'd be willing to share, can you share that document in the chat? And share it with our leadership team members and we can get it sent out.
Hey, can I add just one thing?
Sure. Yep.
I remember being a newer agent, and I would say even a year and a half or 2 years sort of into selling and watching Jake go through this data and being like, I won't ever understand this. So if you're in that boat, you're not alone. And I would just say, keep jumping in, keep showing up at this stuff and sit down with somebody and talk through it with them. You don't have to necessarily even script and role play. Try to teach them what you just heard and see where you run into the snags. So and then the market's always changing. It's new things. Don't not do anything if you're intimidated by it. Do something and keep working through it is my encouragement. It can be intimidating and you're not alone.
Well,
I'm wondering if
don't
you
forget
didn't
that 1
understand it
hour a month.
because How I presented it, maybe that was part of the problem.
Don't forget 1 hour a month, David Arbit. It's a webinar, it gets recorded. You just watch that. I'm Black, 1 hour a month. And then send him an email with a couple questions if you have them.
David Arbit.
He's the guy that pulls all the numbers at the Minneapolis Area Association of Realtors. Thank you.
And he's very good.
So, and I attest that if you can't sign up for it, if you can't be on during that hour, you'll get the link to it so you can listen to it at another time. One of the key takeaways from last week's one was MinneapolisRealtor.com. I can send this to you. If you go to that, to your point, Wendy, if you don't want to calculate how he calculates, as you can see a weekly update. If you go to that main page and you scroll to the bottom, it'll say updates monthly, weekly, and you can click in that. David's got a summary. You'll have 3 points, and it's a really great way before you go to a listing or working with buyers. You can pull up the data just like this, but for the week.
His whole webinar is actually right on the website. I just remember. You could go there and watch the last 3.
He's gonna be live with us, I think, first week of February as well. So keep an eye out for that.
We really want to bring this critical stuff because as we go into a market where people are going to be looking for a little bit more information, we don't have it. But
Even
yeah,
if you have 1 or 2 of these charts, you don't
Yeah.
know where to start, bring 1 or 2 to an appointment.
So I'm going to move on to what I was going to cover in a condensed version. One of my commitments, and sometimes it comes off pessimistic or negative, but the reality is I care about each and every one of you, but I'm not going to love you out of the business. So I'm going to be very transparent and honest on what I think we need to start doing as an industry as a whole. Because how many were in the market in 2008, 9, 10? Okay. There might be resources for you. I'm not saying that's where we're going to, but we're going from reactive of clients coming to us to proactive, where I have to actually go deliver information, understand their needs, and then create the relationship. So with a changing market, what needs to happen with us and our businesses? You think we need to adapt? Okay. I'm only going to give you really easy questions. Hang in there with me. So if our businesses need to change, then what else needs to change? Who wants to change? We got a handful. That was a trick question. It's scary to change.
Did you just
right?
raise your hand?
So I pulled together 3 things that are required for creating lasting change. This isn't going to be anything groundbreaking, but what I would encourage you to do is go internally with regards to how you're showing up right now. What are you doing specifically more on the day-to-day? Nothing significant happens unless it happens every single day. So when you look at what your goals are for 2023, we can set goals. It's really interesting the amount of conversations that I've had just in the past probably 3 weeks. I'm finding agents that they're not unhappy, but they're not happy. Anybody in that spot? Okay, if you are. You know what the most dangerous thing about that is? You're not in enough pain to do anything and you're not inspired to do anything. So you're just sitting there. You're stuck. So what I encourage people to do is, what is my business going to look like 60, 90, 120 days from now, based on what I'm doing today? Because the reality is, I don't want people to be out 120 days and then feel the pinch, because what happens in real estate, when you start revving up, it takes time to get back to where you want to be. So I want you to forecast. I'm sick in the way where I would rather give pain to myself to get me into action than have somebody else give me pain, and now I have to do it based on them giving me pain. Does that make sense? And that could be like pain in the household, be pain from a rainmaker. It could come from a lot of places. Like,
Another way to say that, the pain of regret, pain of discipline now versus the pain of regret later.
100%. How do we bring the regret to the now to get us into action? Because logically, I think we all know that. The challenge is when it's required for change or we're comfortable, it's much more difficult to take action. Okay?
Barry says just buy something really expensive.
Seems like a very wise idea.
Buy something really expensive. If that's your personality profile, I say go for it. It's not mine. I know that we start to sell differently when we have a lot of personal needs or we're running out of money. We show up different to clients versus being financially stable. We nurture relationships differently. I don't care who you are. If you're in a pinch for money, you're going to show up differently. How do I dodge this beam for you guys? We're going to show up differently depending on our situation. So my goal is, let's figure out what changes we need to make now, so we don't put ourselves in a reactive situation that causes some pain. So the first part is you have to believe that change is a must. Now I want you to really think about this. If change is a should, it's not big enough. How many people in here are doing things that are not doing things they know they should? Me too. We're all there. If it's a should, your commitment's not going to be big enough. This is where we've really got to go internally to figure out if what we're saying we want is actually what we want. Because the idea of big goals is awesome. The execution of those big goals doesn't always feel the same. We start strong, which I'm hoping that's what we do. The goal is to create consistency and not falling off and finishing slow. Okay. The second one, you've got to believe that you're the one that has to make the change, meaning you've got to take 100% responsibility. If your goal is, I hope I make the same amount next year or sell the same amount next year, I want to have a conversation. Because if hope is your strategy, it's a very dangerous spot. It's going to require a different version of you and your business next year to do the same or more business. And I don't look at that as a negative. I actually think it's a very positive thing. I love when we get, there's no better place that I get to be than with my back is up against the wall and I don't have really any other options and I've got to go. I don't have any more decisions to make. The decision is made. I'm not where I want to be and I've got.
I think in this market, it's good to remember that there's a big difference between fault and responsibility. It's not your fault that the market is shifting, that these buyers don't want to buy, that that listing agent isn't doing his job, that the sellers won't come down to what's totally a reasonable price. It's your responsibility to get your clients in a home, get yourself income. If your plan is to make as much as you want to next year, it's not your fault the market's changed. It's your responsibility to do more effort to get what you just have.
Interesting when we do 100% responsibility, how much freedom we actually gain from that. When we own 100% of the results, only thing we focus on is what's within our control. What's not within our control? The market, what else? Rates, clients, although we think we do control the clients, which is not true. What do we get to control? So I'm not telling you anything I think that's, wow, what I want to do is let's just get to a place where we feel really good about the decision we've made and the direction that we're going. Okay? And then the third one is that you actually believe that you can change. Because if you take 100% responsibility, but don't believe that you can actually change, what's the chances of you taking that responsibility if it's outside of your control? Pretty minimal. So everyone, there's some really significant producers in here and there's some newer agents in here. I don't really care where you are on that spectrum. The reality is we're all humans on the same journey and we all have to adapt and make changes. Nothing is constant. We all know that, but it's painful to get ourselves to that place. I would just say, let's front load the challenges. I like to think in terms of, it's going to come off possibly pessimistic, but it's fine. When you wake up in the morning expecting everything to be perfect, at 9:30 something doesn't happen that you thought was going to happen, what internally happens inside of you? You're kind of pissed. Like, my day's off to a terrible start. But what if you woke up saying, there's going to be some challenges I get to face today? And 9:30 a challenge shows up. You're like, yep, expected that. Let's work through it. I think our idea of having things work out in our favor because that's the way we prefer them to be is a complete facade, and it sets us up to be really disappointed. I'm not saying let's be super negative. I'm not saying everything's going to fall apart. I am going to say anytime we're doing something significant, there are going to be setbacks. Probably just tells you you're on the right path. Okay. So we're pretty much on point. Okay. 11:56. I wrote this down. I said, let's be aware that it's easy to reject new ideas for the safety of things and activities that we've become so comfortable with. Be careful of not rejecting that the market is changing, that we're rejecting them and have to probably talk to more people to get the same amount of business. The rejection of that idea doesn't make it true. It just puts it behind the 8 ball. Because there will be people that say this, I'm going, and this is the direction that I'm going, and I'm going to provide value to my clients. You're not one of them. They're going to be looking for skilled people. Make sense? So when you look at your strategies in particular for 2023, get honest with your commitment to those strategies. I'm going to make my monthly pitch on finding your group of people or your coach that's going to hold you to the fire if you completely start to fall off the wagon. Accountability is not a negative thing. It's a very positive thing as long as it's done the right way. It can feel negative if it's, did you do it? No, why not? Now we feel like it's a boss, but find an accountability group in your market center. If you're not in one, be scared and raise your hand. Because 2 of the conversations I've had over just the past week, it's people that have isolated themselves from going into the office, from being part of accountability. They've all been part of accountability. And they say, it's not necessarily what I want to do, but I see the value that I need to do it again. Very convinced that the more you isolate yourself, the bigger the struggle is going to be. Be involved. Like Tim said, it's really, you don't realize the level of development that you get by coming into the office and having conversations with other people. All of those conversations compound. Look at your plan, just be honest with yourself. Get a group of people in the office that are on the same path, or find leadership that can help you. You don't have to do this alone. Particularly when it's tougher. You're around other people, even if you don't feel it. Okay? All right. You want to finish on anything?
It's up to you.
Go for it. We got, you can do this
Oh, my
super
goodness.
fast. So
Okay.
go
You
fast.
guys have paper and a pen, take it out. If you don't, you can borrow one. Awesome. If you can't do that, grab the note app on your phone. There is value in writing stuff down. So I'm going to take you through a quick exercise, and you guys can use this over and over and over in your personal life and business life. You can change the time frames on this to make it relevant to what you need. So There's gonna be 4 phases here. Identify. The first thing, and you guys write this down right now, I want you to identify a possibility that exists to you in the next 60 days. Write down, and I'm thinking business right now. If it's in your personal life, that's okay too, but identify possibility. What is a possibility that exists for you in the next 60 days? Second one, I want you to take just a minute here and imagine if we're sitting here in 60 days, what are we celebrating? How do you look? What do you see? What do you hear? How does it feel? I want you to pull in all of your senses to create a vivid vision of 60 days from now when we're celebrating this possibility. What does it look like? This is a vivid vision. And just take a minute and actually write it down. Now we're going to innovate. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. What are your unique strengths and skill sets that will allow you to accomplish that? What can you draw on that you've succeeded with in the past that are your unique strengths and abilities that will allow you to accomplish what you have set in front of you? Once you have your strengths written down, then I want you to write down 2 to 3 specific priorities or pathways to get you there. 3 specific priorities or pathways. Strength, your unique strength. What are the priorities or pathways to get you there?
One more.
Spoiler.
You get Debbie Downer right now. Hey, where's yours? Lastly, implement. Okay, now watch this. We can take a time frame and shrink it down really small. We can start big. What can you do today? What is the thing that you can do today to start taking action on what you just wrote down? I could also say, what is something you could do in the next 5 minutes? What is something you could do, Shane, in the next 60 seconds to start executing on these 2 to 3 priorities or pathways? Go big, or you can go really small. When we talked earlier about being stuck, to me, this is a little different than a 411 for me because this is a process that brings you through to action quickly. We did this in 5 minutes. You could take a day to do this, or you can take 5 minutes when you're feeling stuck and ask yourself these questions and then get into action and take the action now. Cool? Okay, done.
Cool. All right, guys, thanks for hanging with us. Thanks for being here. Hopefully we'll see all of you at holiday parties for the next week. Is about what we're at. So appreciate you guys being here. Have a great Christmas holiday season. Appreciate you guys. Yeah.
He sometimes has headshots over here too.
Headshots back in this back corner if you want to take advantage of that. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you.
That was cool. Great.